There we go. Welcome, everyone.
Hey.
You could kindly mute yourself. That would be wonderful as everyone is coming in. Thank you. I think everyone should be muted as they come in, Mark.
Okay, we can get started there, Sharon. I'll let people come in
Okay.
if anybody else does.
You got it. So I'll go ahead and start with our mission statement. Welcome, everyone. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Helping Parents Heal goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of Helping Parents Heal meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members. So we ask that you take from their presentation whatever may benefit you personally.
Thank you very much. So you can take over letting people in and making sure they're muted. Good evening, everyone, or whatever time it is where you are. It's always an honor to present to this group, and I just want to give a shout out to Jill Collins. Oh my God, this picture of your little one is just mesmerizing me, mesmerizing. I've had a long day. But those eyes, you know, parents talk about a child looking right through you. One of the eyes of an old child. Wow, thank you for sharing that. As many of you who can and who are willing, uh, enable your video, please, so I can see your shining faces. And it's a lot better to interact with actual faces than, yeah, thank you. So a bit of a shift, and a week ago, I decided to make all of my products, all my digital products free. So let me screen share and show you where that is. And so you can go to what? If you go to soulproof.com and then under shop, so here's the website, so you know how to go there because these are free. I know I went crazy. That's the only explanation. So shop is top tab here, and then you'll see that at the top here, I want everybody worldwide to have these. I've been getting orders since we did this from Middle Eastern countries, South Africa, places where people had trouble completing purchases before because of the monetary systems being different. And their credit cards wouldn't work on this system. And I said, forget, just make everything free. And so that's 8 ebooks, 10 audio programs, 4 audio books. We don't control the audios for the other. And so here they are, the 8 books, and then the 10 audio programs. And this is the one we were going to do tonight, actually in person, pre-birth planning. So you see the price down here, a whopping 0.00. I mean, you can't get any more zeros than that, right? So doing that then with those, because before, part of the reason for me doing the actual session with y'all was it so that you could visit the video on YouTube and then use it at no charge. The downside is that ideally this is a 2-hour presentation for me to introduce it, explain what it is, how to get prepared, do the actual session, because the full induction, that is, you're walking downstairs and all that, counting 10 to 1, and the session takes about 45 minutes to do it right. Well, we were trying to rush it through in about 25 minutes, which means people would have a subpar experience and say, well, that didn't work for me. Well, they weren't getting the best. So what we're going to do this evening, I told Sherry I felt like a circus monkey. I was trying to cover 2 hours worth of material in 1 hour, and I don't think it really served anyone. So now that you can access those products, and in particular this one tonight, free, then we can take our time and I can introduce the concept of pre-birth planning, talk about what's the evidence behind it, what is important for you to know to optimally prepare for it, and then answer any questions or concerns. So we're talking about the agenda, what we're going to be doing tonight, some of the common experiences people have, and what do you do if you don't have anything, if you don't have it, and then time for Q&A afterwards. So there's quite a few of you, and obviously some of you hope to have the session tonight, but trust me, it's going to be much, much better. So let's dive in. First of all, the idea of pre-birth planning, just what the name says. The notion, concept, idea, but really it's much more than that because there's evidence behind it, which I'll share in a moment, that souls choose the possibility of specific events in their lifetime. Possibility is a really big word. You don't plan everything. You don't plan everything set in stone. Otherwise, everything would be determined. And why bother having an earthly experience? So potentialities are set up, possibilities. There are a number of factors that determine whether those need to come in play or not. For example, Ernie Jackson, my dear friend, and one of the HPH board members, readily, excuse me, I'll get over this little allergy thing I have. He readily admits that he had input that as a soul, he tended to come to Earth with all these missions, but then he would snooze his way through it. And he'd get back to the other side and say, damn, I did it again. I forgot who I was and why I was here, and I didn't do what I came here to do. So his son, Quinn, who's one of his soulmates, out of love, keep in mind everybody is the eternal soul, say, okay, Dad, I'll pretend to be your son in this space-time experience. We call this earthly experience now. And we'll build in the possibility that my body will get killed. Notice I didn't say Quinn die, because Quinn can't die. Nobody really dies. But the earthly body can. Um, and if it looks like you, Ernie, are doing it again, then my passing will possibly wake you up, shake you up, help you remember. As we say in HPH, passing of a child or any big adversity can make you better or bitter. And so we have an opportunity. And Ernie says, it's really my fault. I mean, he understands the big picture of the thing, but he certainly has kicked himself a bit about that. And like, I was responsible in a way. So that it's a heavy, heavy thing. On the other hand, it's not so heavy if you remember the big picture of life, the great news, which we'll talk about in a moment. So some of the evidence I mentioned, first of all, clinical research from near-death experiences. Many people who have an NDE come back with the understanding that, yeah, that's part of how this works. Souls choose. Souls set up the possibility for. Evidential mediums, many of them certainly pick up details that support that is part of how life is set up, that we as souls plan. The biggest source of evidence that I'm aware of comes from the Life Between Lives work, started by Michael Newton, PhD. By the way, if you visit my website, soulproof.com, and look at the radio shows tab, there's an interview with Michael Newton I did in the year 2000. Also people like Wayne Dyer and Anita Moorjani and 25 others. And just what a wonderful man he was. It was such an honor to talk with him and ask him questions. And that wasn't so long after he wrote his first book, Journey of Souls, and was sharing this information. Pretty cool stuff. So yeah, Life Between Lives, there's just no doubt about it. That's part of how this set works. Pre-birth planning. Caitlin Mays, who's another one of my radio show guests, I think was one of the first that talked about this. She presented in terms of sacred contracts or soul contracts that soulmates will set up the possibility of certain events. So that's another way to look at this. Other evidence comes from more enlightened religious denominations. In other words, more fundamentalist ones, really conservative ones, and I hope I'm not stepping on your toes. And I never name names, but they'll say, it's God's decision and it's God's will and everything is up to God. So let me comment on that. It depends on what God you're talking about. If you're talking about a big guy in the sky with long white hair sitting on the throne, kind of the Greco-Roman image from the several centuries BC, then no, that's not the God that, you die, you live, you go to hell, you go to heaven. I totally reject that, and many people do. However, if you go with the current concept of God, which is the creator and sustainer of all life, all that is, all the creativity, love, peace, intelligence that exists, and we each are integral parts of that. What Suzanne Giesemann says, we each are droplets of God. If you use that definition of God, then yeah, it is God's will. But because we are part of that phenomena, it's also our will. In other words, God doesn't make us, you're going to go down there and have a child die. No, not me. That's not the way it unfolded. The souls will be like, okay, I understand. And your child, who it's so important to look past appearances. So, I mean, like this little Jill's little guy or gal, sorry, kind of hard to tell. You look at that and you say, oh, it's so sad, they passed. But then you got to remember they're eternal souls, they're eternal beings of energy, consciousness, life force, perhaps much more evolved than us. And that's why they only needed to come to Earth for a blink of an eye. They knew the great news, things like um, I've been talking about, no one really dies. Life and love are forever. We see our loved ones again. We're all part of the one. This time on Earth it's like a virtual reality trip. It's like watching a movie. I know to a human heart, it doesn't seem that way. Um, yeah, yeah, just yesterday we had our first meeting of coordinators for the Greater Reality programs we're launching. Deborah is there, and if you want to learn about the programs, that's described on the website under the top tab, Greater Reality Programs. But one of the moms, one of the volunteers, we had 4 people from HPH. We had 2 women who had breast cancer, and their recovery from that was what awoke them. And this is a common theme to remember, that when adversity strikes, when you go through tough times, that can be a exquisite way to awaken and remember the big picture of life. Anyway, this mom said, when my son passed, it broke my heart, but it also opened it to do what I'm doing now. I was like, oh my gosh, that's it in a nutshell. And I know many of you understand that, or you're in the process of understanding that. So it breaks your human heart, but it opens your energetic heart, and it helps you remember who you are, why you're here, etc. And so this that philosophical view, and also the surfaces in more liberal, enlightened religions and spiritual paths, makes so much sense to me and others, because so many people say, well, there's a loving God and yet there's so much suffering on earth. How do those coexist? Well, when you understand that souls have a choice, we're in the process of remembering we're little gods, part of God, and we have free will to make mistakes or change our mind, or we fall down. That's part of the process. That's how we grow. We're not created fully formed automaton. So there's some of the evidence behind that. Next, I want to share the wisdom of choosing the possibility of choosing adversity, because a common reaction for many people, and I understand that the first time you hear that, especially if you're more recently on the grieving path, and especially if it was really like murder or suicide or OD or so on. If you're raw, in other words, in your grief recovery, if you are hearing the idea of your soul plan the possibility of this, you're like, no way, you're crazy. This is stupid. It's ridiculous. Who would choose that? And I understand that initial reaction. However, it makes more sense when you remember the various things I've been talking about. We're one with the one, no one really dies. Your children are your soulmates and possibly your teachers. When I did the interviews with 130 Shining Light parents, a number of them said they found out afterwards through evidential mediums that their children were their guides. God, I'm getting teared up just thinking about it. Or their children were angels in training, or their children were their teachers, their spiritual teachers. That's what you want to remember, and then that's what helps all this make more sense. Yeah, while I'm thinking of it, let me also share this. So we're now looking at the Helping Parents Heal site. And to show you how much, I type in H and it pops up. So it shows you how often I use this. So here's the Helping Parents Heal site. If you go to the top tab, Resources, and then scroll down to Shining Light Resources, this is a list of all the free services, caring listeners. So everything is right here. Elizabeth and I assembled this. And then here are the most commonly asked about articles. And then we had 4 of these YouTube where I did the quick holistic breathing, ask your soul, pre-birth planning, but now you have access to the long, full professional version. So I want you to know about that resource. Now let's talk about, because again, we're preparing you to have this session yourself at home. And that was the other downside of doing these sessions in a group like this. In addition to the others, some people would just get off work, they rush in the house, or it's the end of the day, they got up early in the morning, they're tired, they tend to fall asleep, or they're too much caffeine, whatever. So I want to go over some things that will help you optimally prepare so you'll have a really deep, meaningful, optimal pre-birth planning experience. So those include, first of all, you want to sit up straight, because if you are laying down, there's a chance that you will fall asleep. My voice tends to do that to people. Okay. And the other thing is you want to be rested. So whatever that means, if you need to take a nap, if you need to use it earlier in the morning, but you don't want to be fatigued, you want to be rested so that you have the chi, the energy to basically go back to this time of pre-birth planning, to have clarity, have energy to pull that off. Also, it's important to use diaphragmatic breathing, which, if you're not familiar with it, you put your hand on your abdomen, and when you breathe in, your abdomen actually bulges out. And when that happens, your diaphragm drops down, which allows optimal inflation of your lungs. And then when you exhale, your abdominal muscles pull up and in, diaphragm raises, breath goes out. That's how singers breathe. That's the most powerful and relaxed way to breathe. So diaphragmatic breathing. And by the way, I mentioned all this in the introductory track. So when you get this free pre-birth planning product, again, for those of you who came in afterwards, at soulproof.com/shop, there'll be 2 tracks. First of all, the introduction. I think it's about 15 minutes long. You only need to listen to it a time or two, especially after what we're doing tonight. And then after that, you just do the session. Other things are that you want to let your mouth part open slightly. So this is after we do the contraction relaxation. We go through all the muscle groups, contract, relax as you're breathing in and out. Or when you get done, near the end, you contract and relax your facial muscles. Well, at that point on, then your mouth should be partly open, and no one will be in the room with you. So it's not like somebody's going to see you. But if you're keeping your mouth shut, then that uses muscles, which requires your brain. So a big part of this approach is to quiet your brain. We've talked in numerous meetings that the brain is a wonderful slave, but a horrible master. It thinks it knows everything, but it actually perceives much, much less than 1% of reality. So that's why it's useful to quiet your brain periodically through meditation, prayer, yoga, walking in nature, various centering practices that I talk about in article number 77 at soulproof.com. And that's what we do in this technique. Quiet your brain, help you deeply relax, give guided imagery so that you can just naturally, very naturally, go back to the place of pre-birth planning. Certainly focus on my voice. I will talk about your spiritual support team um, who are there to greet you at the Hall of Truth and give you a healing shower. They're sitting with you when you're having your experience. So we're talking about here your angels, guides, master teachers. So you can see them however you like. You know, an angel can be a swirl of beautiful energy and light, or it can be a huge person with indeed wings. So however they pop into your mind is fine. As far as the place of pre-birth planning, in the actual session, you'll be deeply relaxed now by this point, and I'll say, just let yourself become aware of the place of pre-birth planning. And some people will be in a nature setting. Other people see themselves as though on the control panel of the Starship Enterprise. Other people see themselves in front of a computer screen because in a way, this is like a software program. Okay, this is what we're designing. We're setting up these possibilities. Depending on what happens here, then we may do this next. When I first did it, to my surprise, I found myself in this sacred nature setting, which I was facing the ocean, but on one side of me was a desert. Behind me were mountains. On the other side of me were forests. Not sure any place like that exists where everything is right there together. Maybe California. And but that's just my place. You know, when I do this, which I do periodically, that's just automatically where I go to. And as you use it, you may find a different place surfaces over time. Now, this next point is really important, and that is you don't want to think of answers. So if I say, all right, see yourself in your place of pre-birth planning. You don't want to say, let's see, what could that be? You're not using your brain to think of this. Big, big key, just like in meditation using a mantra. You want to let it pop in or float up like a bubble that arises from the bottom of a pond and rises up through the water, gets to the surface, and then pops. That's how you want the information to come to you. Again, the difference between your brain thinking and your consciousness knowing or remembering. As I mentioned, we do the contraction relaxation. I'll have you visualize. Now, I said visualize, but this is a multi-sensory experience. Ideally, different people have different sensory orientations. In other words, some people are more visually oriented, some more auditorily, some people more kinesthetic, they can feel, others more cognitive, they have a knowing. And so the deepest experiences come if you can not be tied to my words. I try to mix up my verbs so they cover those four ways of knowing, but just for example, when you're walking down a staircase, as I count from 10 to 1, you can see the stairs, you can feel your feet touching them, you can hear your footsteps, you can know you're walking. So multisensory involvement. Now, it's really important to know, and I was trained, I spent a week getting certified by Brian Weiss, MD, to do past life regressions in '98, but I first started using clinical hypnosis when I got my master's in clinical psych in 1980. So I've been using these techniques for a while, but many people, while they're hypnotized slash deeply relaxed, notice a difference in how time proceeds. So when we're on Earth, for most people, things seem to be unfolding logically, sequentially, linearly. But when you're really relaxed, when the brain is turned down, um, you may it may seem like you're right in the midst of this, like it's really unfolding. You may receive a download in a fraction of a second that then you watch the rest of the experience. So just be aware that there can be an alteration in your perception of time, because you understand time is, to a large extent, a human concept. And then also how real things seem. In other words, on Earth, we get used to things seeming so solid. But when you're doing this technique, things may not have the same solidity. So they may seem subtle, imaginary, fleeting, and that's okay. Now, here's an important one. There's some good evidence that before souls come to Earth, that they set up with their team, again, angels, guides, master teachers, preparatory cues, symbols, keywords, or events. And the soul knows that when those happen, that might wake the person up. It's kind of like an alarm going off. For example, one man during a session was reliving being a child in a previous life. And he said, I was 6 years old and riding my bike. And all of a sudden I saw this older woman walking down the street, and she had this large pendant around her neck. And he said, I saw that pendant. I was so drawn to that. And they got talking, and she became kind of a mentor to him, a friend, kind of a spiritual teacher. And he realized that she was one of his soulmates, and that pendant was a symbol, a sign to help him know, help his soul see through his earthly disguise and brain functioning. Hey, this is somebody I should get to know. So in the technique, I mentioned be aware of any cues, symbols, words that will help you realize you're dealing with a soulmate, and it is indeed time to up your game, however you want to put it. In terms of frequency of using this technique, once or twice a week in the beginning, depending on how much you want to explore this concept of pre-birth planning. This can be most helpful for parents who are still struggling. You understand at some point, some people have peace about it. Okay, I have peace. How and when my child passed. But for people who are struggling, how does this make sense? Maybe you want to do this once or twice a week to help you escape your brain struggling and trying to compute something that it can't compute, because this is a cosmic event. This is a spiritual event. This isn't solid, just earthly stuff, what you're going through with your child. This is really deep, heavy, soulful, important stuff. So then after you use it for a while, once or twice a week, then you'll notice that, say you're scheduled to do it that day. It's like, I just don't feel like I need it today. That's okay. Listen to your inner knowing, and then maybe do it once every couple of weeks, and then once a month. I use it every few months, just kind of like a maintenance visit. I just covered a lot of things. Let's take a break for questions here. Any questions, but we're limiting to pre-birth planning. So this isn't to ask the soul doctor, but on pre-birth planning. Questions, concerns, if you think you're going to do this, say, tomorrow on your own with the technique, what do you feel like something you're worried about? Yes, Marina.
I have a question. We discussed several times that each reincarnation is some experience. And what is the final goal of that experience? When our reincarnation stops, if at all? This question number one. And question
Hold on, dear. And good to see you again, by the way. Maria and I are an interesting combination, because I can't hear for crap. And she's got this rich accent and kind of talks a little quickly. So let's slow it down. And Sherry, I may even have to ask you to interpret, but let's have you ask that again, please.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Question. You mentioned several times that we have several incarnation, And during each incarnation, we got some experience. What is the final goal? How many reincarnations we might have? What is the goal of that experience? And if I may ask question number two.
Okay. First of all, that question doesn't have to do with our topic tonight. That's
Okay.
the most deep question a person can ask. So email me, mark@soulproof.com with that question. But we need to stick to the topic. Your second one?
Question one. Our souls come to life at different times. So we come before our children, obviously. So how come we can come to agreement with our kids? How come our souls be in agreement with our children's soul if we come to earth before them and our soul reincarnates before?
I get it. You are one heavy lady. You know that? I mean, that's just so deep thinking. Good for you. I mean, pat yourself on the back for thinking things like that. Here's the answer. First of all, we've talked about that on average, the average person on Earth only needs about 40% of their soul's energy to pull off this earthly visit. So let's say 60% of your energy is still at home, the really real place, heaven. So that part of you is there with your child. And so that part of your energy can do the planning with your child's energy soul, even though part of you is on Earth. There's another way to look at that. You and your child may have planned this before you even came to Earth. In other words, this could have been planned before you were born. So there's two ways to look at that. Do you have any other questions? I shouldn't have asked.
It is easy one for you. What is the difference between guides and master teachers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Generally, when I say master teachers, I'm referring to people who lived on Earth, and generally great religions formed around them. So for me, my most meaningful master teachers are Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, who is a female goddess recognized by Buddhism and Hinduism, and also Confucius and numerous religions. Those are the main three that are meaningful for me. So those are master teachers. Then you know about angels. You understand the concept of angels. Well, guides are, in my mind, not quite as evolved as angels, but perhaps in training to be angels. They are souls who have been to Earth many times. They've been around the block, so to speak. And so they're available to help. Your guides can whisper things to you while you're on Earth. And then when your body dies and you re-enter the light, your guides can be there to greet you, to help orient you, show you around. So they're just another level of helpers, which is why I call them heavenly helpers or part of the spiritual support team. Keep asking those great questions, dear one, and letting it shine. All right, any other questions at this juncture?
There's a question in the chat from Amanda saying, I can get into meditations, but then I get this fear that comes over her. I open my eyes. Any tips on how to get past this?
Sure. Well, first of all, this isn't a meditation. It's a guided imagery, deep relaxation. So this is different from a meditation quote. But if that's happening to you, then, and we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, but that's okay. This falls into the category of what if you don't have a optimal experience. My holistic breathing technique is one of the most important tools for this kind of situation. It's described in article number 70, and it's one of the free audio programs, okay, holistic breathing technique, because there's a good chance that you have anxiety, fear, lower energy emotions, guilt, shame, blame, anger, all this stuff inside you. And when you get quiet or you try to get quiet within, it bubbles up. These energies are letting you know that they're still there. They need to be dealt with. Well, one of my teachers, Ram Dass, called uncooked seeds. And so if you use if you find that's the case, then set this pre-birth planning technique aside for now and take a month and use the holistic breathing 2 or 3 times a week and get more clear. You'll cry your heart out. You'll pound the mattress, get all this rage out. And then you're not carrying that around like carrying your dirty laundry around. And then you much more likely will have a meaningful experience. Great question. Who else before we continue?
Oh, so can I ask a question?
Sure. Can I see you?
Oh, sure. Can you see me now?
Yep.
Good evening. This is Monica. So I've done the holistic breathing. If I don't have what you just described, I'm more even keel. I'm just more breathing. I swam today and I love that because it forces me to breathe and not hold my breath. But I'm just trying to understand what you said. If I don't have like crying and emotional, can I move on from the holistic less?
Well,
Reiterate for me if
yeah,
possible.
that's a good question. So for the others who aren't familiar with it, holistic breathing is 45 minutes of deep,
Yeah.
noisy, diaphragmatic breathing. So it sounds like ah, and there's these different kinds of music in the background and me coaching and yelling. And so a lot of people in the beginning, yeah, they will cry and release and so on. But if you find then that you're feeling more peaceful, it's more like first you're just doing the breathing, and
Mhm.
yeah, that's an indication that you don't need it as much, maybe once a month, and
Okay.
then you should be able to have a good experience like pre-birth planning and others.
I'm so glad you cleared that up.
Yeah, me too. All right, one more question before we get back to the information, or are we good?
I don't see any more questions, just comments.
Okay. So now we're talking about what you should do just before the session. First of all, you want to have read article number 25, which discusses a lot of this because the more you understand, the better your experience is going to be. So read article number 25. But now, just right before the session, you want to make sure you have drank a little water so your mouth doesn't get dry. You want to have some tissues right beside you if you're emotional. When you have this pre-birth planning, if you tend to be teary, then have some tissues. Moisten your lips with chapstick or some sort of product so your lips don't get dry, and go to the bathroom. Okay, so you've taken care of that. The other thing is you want electronics off, except for obviously the device you're using for this technique. Now, this is an audio program, which means you could use it on your phone. You don't have to have a laptop. Your eyes are closed. There's nothing to see. So you just need some way to play this audio. Otherwise, phones off, your ringers off, everything else. The other thing is you want a quiet environment. Some people, especially, are really healing, like pets, companion pets, dogs and cats, but that's not a good thing when you're having a session like this because a pet can crawl on you and then that diverts you, that brings you back into your earthly experience and takes you away from this cosmic experience. So pets can be somewhere else. If you have a barking pet, uh, I don't understand barking pets. The but just deal with them. You have somebody else in the house say, hey, no, don't interrupt, or do this when no one else is in the house. So just create the optimal environment. Now, some recommendations for after using the technique. This is deep. When we do this, it's as close as you can get to having an out-of-body experience from something like this. And so some people want to be quiet afterwards. In other words, after you do it, you probably don't want to go to a rock concert, okay? That probably wouldn't. You don't want to be around a lot of people. You don't want to be around a lot of noise. So just honor that. Let yourself stay in that sacred space for a while. If you're going to drive or operate heavy machinery afterwards, that was a joke, make sure you really focus, okay? Because this technique and some of the others, ask your soul and past life regressions and visiting with your child, the afterlife contact session. And by the way, again, all of those are available free under shop at soulproof.com. But that takes you into a whole different state of consciousness. So you want to be careful. I mean, it'd be like if you had a few drinks or something. You want to be more careful if you have to drive. Also, it's very useful to journal afterwards. Write down some notes. What did you experience? What do you remember? And also for about a week after each session, dreams that come up, spontaneous insights. If you'll jot those down, you'll have a lot more information to use going forward. And then finally, it can be useful to share your experience with trusted dear ones. Just saying, teacher, those who teach, the saying is, you teach what you most need to learn. Gosh, I must need to learn a lot. So when you share with others, you're teaching in a way, you're sharing, and that helps internalize it versus keeping it to yourself. And then the last thing I want to share is before we entertain some more questions, is common experiences. So many people will have then a very meaningful experience. They'll be like, wow, I saw it all. I remember, I know now why my child and I set up this situation, and it helps make more sense. And then that's when you can go about fulfilling the missions that you and your child designed. You can remember the program. You can remember the name of the game you're playing. And then you can get more meaning out of it. You can make your child proud. You can honor them. You can find the silver linings and share them with others. You can get your money's worth. There's a whole lot of ways to put this, but you can fulfill the reason for having it. So a lot of people have deep and profound experiences like that. Not always the first time, like practice makes perfect, but certainly the second or third time, once you get used to it more and go deeper into this. However, as we've already touched upon, some people don't have a meaningful experience, and we talked about the holistic breathing technique as one way to get more clear. Talked about repetition, use it more. You can always contact me, Mark at soulproof.com, and my answers are going to be short and to the point, and I'm not going to write you a 5-page letter because I get a lot of these every day, but I'll just say, do this, read this article, try this. So the point is, don't get discouraged, especially if you've just done it a couple of times. Go over again the recommendations in the introduction, both in the article, number 25, and in the audio program, and make sure you're checking everything off. Like, if you had too much coffee, yeah, you're going to be jittery, you're going to be wired. That's your brain. And so your clear consciousness won't be as accessible. Okay, that's a lot of information, and now you have everything you need to really have a deep experience like this. If you have some concern about doing this by yourself, you may want to do it with a trusted friend. Some parents will, say the husband and wife, will both do it at the same time and then compare notes afterwards. And sometimes they'll come with, oh my gosh, that's what I saw too, why this was planned. And you can also do it with close friends, other relatives. So I will open it up again to questions about this technique.
Not seeing any questions, but I was just wondering if we can clarify if anyone came in a little bit late, to understand that you're going through the process and instructions so they can do these sessions on their own, that it's not going to be done this evening.
Correct. Yeah, you want to explain it in your own words for people who came in late, Sherry, what we did this evening and why?
Well, there was quite a bit that was covered by Dr. Pitstick this evening, different articles, and every article he had referenced, I tried to place in the chat, and helping us by his wonderful offering of giving all of this for free on his website, instructions on how to prepare ourselves to do the holistic breathing, to do these deeper sessions, and the instructions on how to prepare ourselves before being rested, having water, chapstick, no distractions, no pets, and selecting a time that's most comfortable for us, that we can do these sessions. And also to note that it may not be, in the first time that you do it, that you will have these deep experiences or a direct message or dreams, but it does take practice. And in doing so, I think you will be very surprised and pleased at the experiences that you'll have with your higher consciousness and your child. I think that covers
Thank
it.
you. So again, that audio product at soulproof.com/shop. I wonder if there are any other questions or concerns before we part for the evening. And remember that the third Monday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern, we do a Ask the Soul Doctor where you can ask anything, your biggest questions and your toughest challenges. And I'll answer the questions and create on the spot holistic solutions for your challenges and teach you how to do that using the website. That's another reason I made all those free. I want people to be able to go to the website. Oh, I should read these articles, read this book, use these techniques, because that's basically what I do when people contact me and with their problems. Any questions, any concerns? All right, while we have a moment then, okay, Marina, Knight. Let's give somebody else a chance and we'll come back here to you. So we're at the soulproof.com website again, and under articles, 125 articles now. Yes, I've lost my mind. They just keep popping up. And so the one that I want to share with you, number 82, Greater Reality Healing Program, Journeying from Deeply Grieving to Brightly Shining. So this is a program that I put together partly based on the Helping Parents Heal program, but this is for all people who are dealing with what seem to be losses, but which are really changes, shifts. And so you see right in the beginning, special thanks to the HPH organization. There are 18 videos, 18 30-minute videos that describe all this. They're not quite up yet, but when they are, you'll go to Greater Reality Programs and then Greater Reality Healing and then here are the placemats for all the videos. So you'll be able to watch this. And then probably late spring, we'll start actually having meetings, online meetings, and then later in-person groups for this greater reality healing. And then I shared with you already, Shop, how you can access all these books, ebooks, audiobooks for 4 of them, and then the audio products, including what we covered tonight. So now you know where all these free resources are. And then, as I mentioned, you can email me, mark@soulproof.com, and I'll give you a quick but information-dense answer. And Marina, you have one more question there?
Sherry already answered my question. It was somebody asking in the chat what exactly, where we can find this technique. Sherry already answered.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, again, it's been an honor. Put this to use. If there's any way I can help you, let me know. And the same way with helping parents heal, all the caring listeners, the affiliate leaders, we have a legion of people there to help you wherever you're at on the healing journey. And you don't have to do this by yourself. We'll walk you through it. We'll get you what you need so you can be a brightly shining one. One more thing. Isn't there always one more thing? And that is, since we have an extra moment, if we go back to the Helping Parents Heal website, at the top it says YouTube videos, and then affiliate leader and caring listeners. And here's Lynn Hollahan. She's not my wife. I've had numerous people say, you and your wife look so cute together. Well, don't tell her husband Jeff that. But we together interviewed 130 of these parents, amazing parents, and these are the interviews then that led to the book, Shining Light Parents Speak. So if you haven't watched these, they're all free, and they're just the most tremendous things. I learned so much from every one of these parents, and they're there. Keep in mind again, these are the Shining Light parents. They're all affiliate leaders and or caring listeners, and they're walking the talk. They've been through the dark night of the soul, but they've come out on the other side, and they're some of the most happy, peaceful, loving activists. They're out there making a difference. And so watch these, watch one a day. Watch one before you go to bed at night. So I wanted to make sure you see where that is. Okay, now we should really leave because we have Galen having a meeting up next. Let it shine.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. I put my email also. If anyone is at all confused on the steps that were covered tonight, shoot me an email and I'll outline it for you. I'm happy to help. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mark.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good night.
Giving you all air
Thanks,
hugs.
Mark.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know?
Well, thank you, Sherry. Great
Thank
evening.
you so
Appreciate
much.
your help.
Thank you for all your offerings for everybody. Good night.
All right. Take care.